Welcome to the Women Leading on Climate podcast. I'm Catherine McKenna. I'm bringing you this podcast on the ground from Brazil as we head into COP30. I'm thrilled to speak with three amazing Brazilian women climate leaders about their vision for this COP, including the critical role of women and the unique opportunities they see for climate action in Brazil and the global south. First up, I managed to get a few minutes with my friend, Chief Executive Officer of Brazil's COP, Toni, in the very loud corridors before a pre-COP mayor's event in Rio.
Okay, here I am in Rio. We're at a C40 event, which is just to the start, right before COP30 starts, and I'm with Toni. So you got a lot of noise here. But Anna, why don't you talk to me about the COP30? You're the CEO, so tell us what's going to happen. What can we expect?
First, it's so nice to be here surrounded by mayors. That shows this is a talk about implementation. And when we think about implementation, we're thinking about the mayors, private sector. And that's exactly what we are hoping for COP30, that we can give a big impulse for implementation. And we can see that everybody's in the same mood. We go for this big mood, for combating climate change. And we have seen civil society, mayors, private sector together with us. So yes, a little bit with cold in the stomach now, just a few days to the COP. But I think we have done our homework, and I'm now happy and excited and optimistic that everything will be fine.
Well, I have to say, there are so many women leading on climate, but Toni has been working so hard over the last year to get this MOP done. So it's a COP of implementation. That's what you've heard. We need to see that action. We need to see that outcome at the end of COP. And then it doesn't end here. It goes from Brazil, and we just all keep on going.
Absolutely. And when we talk about COP of implementation, we know that women are there implementing every day. And that's exactly what you needed to show at COP30.
Well, we're going to show that, and thank you, Toni. It's going to be awesome.
Thank you.
So next, I'm really excited to be talking to an amazing young woman, Paloma Costa. She's a youth activist from Brasilia. She was appointed to the UN's first Youth Advisory Council on Climate Change. She's director of Fonds d'Action. She's helped advance climate litigation in Brazil, and she's done so many other things. She has a great Instagram with really amazing stories from the community she visits, so check it out. But it's great to see you, Paloma. How you doing?
I'm very nice. How about you?
I am great. You always have such a great smile. It makes me feel really, really happy. And I remember when we first met, I was like, I am with the young people, where I was on with you and two other climate youth from around the world. And we were on UN TV during New York Climate Week, and it was super fun. Such a good conversation.
That's true. And I had the same feeling. I am with Catherine and McKenna. Oh my God.
Oh my God. Well, you're way cooler than me. But that was a great time. So look, I want to start, talking about how it's hard. And I think it's important that, we are real here on the podcast. So how are you feeling about climate right now, and how are you feeling personally?
And honestly, I think all of us, we feel how much overwhelming it all could be, especially when we have to wait for so long for decision makers to take further and advance climate action, climate implementation, and so on. But one thing that I try to never lose is to have faith in my community, faith on the solutions that I see on ground and on the territories. In the past few years, I saw so many people who are part of the same community fighting against each other because they feel there are different ways of implementing things. But when I go back to territories, when I'm spending time with my nephews, as I'm doing right now, I remember myself, and I try to remember everyone else, that what we have of most important is the human relations, is this life that surrounds us, and all the solutions that are out there. So if we are smart enough, we can see them, we can um, be part of it and we can implement them. So I try to never lose hope, even though like I know sometimes, especially like with third wars, economics and political constraints and problems, I try to remember like what united us in the first place, and definitely it is the cool breezes, the trees, the family, and the love that is out there.
I love that because it is really hard. And also, you're like, are we this stupid that we won't actually scale the solutions we have to save our planet? And then you remember, like, oh, there are really great people out there. And if we work together and we focus on what's important, our relationships, nature, our families, that we will make the difference, especially women. And we will come back to that. Okay, Brazil COP. Okay, give me the lowdown. And for all the women and girls who are wondering, okay, these climate negotiations that are happening in Brazil this year, like what are they all about? Because I think we often talk at a really high level about these outcomes that don't really mean anything to real people in a very tangible way. So, what are you hoping will happen at this COP that'll have a real impact in people's lives in sure, the short term, but also the long term?
And I think like the first thing is that finally we are having like what based here in Latin America, in Brazil, in the Amazonian territory. So I think like one thing that always touches everyone's heart and makes sure that we have a community that is active, that is observing the decisions and how things are happening. I think this territorial conference done in the Amazon, it has a great power because it will be like the first time that I will be able to take a delegation of 200 people that are bringing and that are working from their territories to these international levels with their demands, with their solutions, with their community participations, and within these voices from territories in the Amazon, in the South America, and so on. This is the first. But the second, and I think the most important one, is that I think this COP on, besides all the problems around being the people's COP on housing and so on, there is also the great expectation that is gonna be finally the COP that unlock the finances for us to implement the different projects across the world. I know there is a huge expectation on how it's finally gonna work, the TFF and so on, as
What is
another.
the TFF? No one knows what the TFF is. What is it? It's like a fund. It's a
Yeah,
fund
forest forever, as it says.
for us forever.
Um, and honestly, like that is super beautiful. Imagine having forests forever. This is something that in the last few years I thought it was impossible. But the most important thing about this fund, and I don't think this will be the ultimate like decision that will change the world, it is the construction that has been made with different people from the ground, from the territories. So I think this could be a plus. But in the end, what we all want, and especially here in South America and Latin America and Brazil in the Amazon, is that as we had the Paris Agreement, we want the Amazon Agreement. Because funds and commitments on raising money, raising funds, they are not enough when they are not implemented. So what we are really expecting is that countries, people, decision makers, and most importantly, our global community will take the time to finally commit to the Amazon. And that's the real agreement that we want. We want the Amazonian agreement that all of us, no matter where we are, no matter what we do, we are going to be taking care of these frontiers, these last frontiers of life in the world, that are housing, that are life, that are rain, that are food, that are everything for all of us. So I really expect that this COP, we have a result like that and led by women.
Of course, if we're going to get things done, we're going to have to be led by women. And luckily, there are very strong women in Brazil. We'll come to that. But let's take a little break here. I like asking people, okay, so asking the women that come on the show, like when you need to recharge, you need a break, you need to be at peace. What do you do? I love swimming. I go whatever lake or ocean. I guess if I have to find a swimming pool, it gets kind of cold here in winter. I just like going swimming, but especially when I'm outside in a beautiful place, just putting my head down and, just remembering what's important, and being with nature. So, what about you? What do you like doing?
Well, I think it's not too much like far away from what you do, but I do love the same. I was born in the Cerrado, in the center of Brazil, and I love it to walk in waterfalls to see the different animals. I love seeing animals, no matter if they are super small or super big, and trekking and swimming and climbing trees and taking flowers and putting them here and then there, da da da. But nowadays, I think one thing that is in my heart, and I think I'm unlocking another part of climate justice, climate action, is diving and connecting with the deep ocean, understanding that there is a huge and different forest down deep there, and how this impacts our lives and how this change the way that we see ourselves in the world. Because for me, like when I first went to the Amazon, I saw those big trees, and I remember thinking, "Oh my God, this is so big! I'm so small, close to it." And then when I am in the ocean and I see like a big shark, a big whale, this blue that you see no end, I always have the same feeling, like, "Oh my God, I'm super small." And even being so small, I know the force and the strength that we have to change the things around us. How we can disturb just being like a little diver in the ocean, how we can disturb doing different stuffs in the forest. So when we are amazed, we can amaze and do amazing things, right? So I think like dive deep, oceans, waterfalls, rivers, trees, and everything. That's my peaceful moment.
I love it. I love diving too. And it's a reminder because we're so small and we also know so little really about the oceans. So that's really awesome. Okay, so you were out in the field. I saw some amazing pictures. So tell me some stories because I think a lot of people don't know about Brazil and these amazing communities. So you went on a trip recently and you posted about it. So maybe just give us a little sense of who you see, who you're working with, what people want.
The last trip there it was in the territory that is called Capoto Jarina. I was in a community that's called Mupa. Even though the territory is a territory for the Kayapó Mebengo Cree people, this specific community was from the Yuja people. And for me it was like a moment of remembering, because we were organizing the gathering of the caravans is a project that we are doing together with 12 territories here in Brazil, including Capoto Jarina, but also territories in Ecuador, Panama, Colombia, Mexico. And it was the moment that we had together everyone in person together, think of on the ways that in our campaign for COP30, we decided to do like something that in Portuguese is called a gente cobra, and that the translation will be like people snake. And the snake is something that is very important, especially in the Amazon, because if you see how the river is done, there is different peoples that in Brazil we have around 307 people. It's a lot. But a lot of indigenous communities, they believe that the is the where the life is, and it's the snake of life. And it's super important that we understand that snake is also the river. And they say a lot on how the snake changed her skin to become a new river, and depending on the river that the water is not the same. So I think it's a little bit when we come and we talk about communities, we relate a lot, because I think as human beings we are always changing We are always like learning. We are always understanding how this planet works. And when we understand ourselves, there's rivers, and especially in the Amazon, that these rivers, they are flying rivers, goes to Africa and come back with rain and everything. We understand how connected we are. And for me, the moment that was super special, it was because the first time I was in the Amazon, I was with Chief Hauni, that became a symbol in the indigenous fight here in, I think, in the world, but especially here in Brazil, Latin America. And I was able to see him again. And well, years didn't stop passing. I know he's like very reaching almost 100 years, and this is a lot. I cannot imagine like how many things he saw in this much time. But I think for me, it is always important to talk with him and be reminded this fight always continue from youth, from young generations to the elders, how we are learning to do these paths together, and we are like building them much more stronger, much more collectively. And I was telling him that the first time that I saw him, Davi Yanomami, which is another big leader here from Brazil, he passed us over the bow and the arrow to fight for indigenous rights. And for me, it was a huge responsibility to be taking care of this. I told him like super heavy. I don't know if I want to like hold this up, but gladly I have a lot of friends. And right now, when we saw Haoni again, he reinforced it that he's super happy that we kept taking the bow and the arrow like forward, that we are building community, and that we are organizing the caravans, that we are organizing the People's Climate Alliance, which is an alliance that is a memory from the alliance he created himself in the 70s for indigenous rights in Brazil. So I think we are making history, that's for sure. And I hope this demands on ground on protecting the rivers. Rivers are life. They are where we get fish, where we get like where we transportate ourselves. And with the climate impacts, they are being so dry. We have like in some areas in the territories that you cannot even pass a boat anymore. So imagine like doing healthcare. If a woman has to do a baby and she cannot deliver there and so on, there's so many problems involved. And I think we've been reminded that we are snake, that we are the river, that we are part of this ecosystem. This reminds us like the importance on connecting and being connected and acting collective.
I love that. Well, that's amazing. I love that you're out in the communities too, because I think that that's when you really, you connect with people and you see how they're living and what they really care about. And that is very different than sometimes the climate negotiations, or often, too often, the lack of leadership that we see by countries. So, okay, last thing. Now it is time. We're hanging out. I wish I was hanging out with you right now,
Oh,
but in person. But we're hanging out. We're having a glass of wine. So, what would be the song you would blare? You'd blare on the stereo.
oh, definitely. Refloreste o pensamento, which means reforesting your mind. It was a song that was made by one of my best friends, the grandson of Chief Hauni. His name is Matsipaya Tukahamani. And for me, the special thing about the song is that we recorded the video clip together during the pandemic and the strikes of the indigenous movement during the pandemic. So I helped do the signs. I helped him like take film here, film from this angle. And I'm a lawyer, like in my formation. I'm not like a communicator. So seeing it all together, seeing the lyrics, seeing his plane, how it ended up, like it always touched my heart. And most important, the message, because we need to reforestate our mind and reforestate with the reef as well. Not only forests, but reefs as
I
well.
love that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, that's great. You know what? We're gonna catch up soon. Have a glass of wine, and you can play it for me, and maybe we can even dance. So
That
Paloma, you are so inspiring. You're so inspiring for young people, for women that are older like me, and I love how you keep it real. So looking forward to seeing you soon. Bye.
bye.
Turning now from youth activism and Indigenous leadership to climate and nature policy. I'm really excited to be talking to the brilliant Ilona Szabo. She's the co-founder of the Igarapé Institute and of the Green Bridge Facility. She also had a really awesome TED Talk with Brazil as a world nature superpower. And she happens to be married to a Canadian who grew up my street in Hamilton. How about that, Ilona? Good to see you again, not hanging out on my street where I grew up.
Wonderful to see you, Catherine. Many, many synergies there, as we can see.
Yeah, it's really great. And it's, a big year for you because we have the COP, the climate conference in Brazil coming up. So we'll talk a lot about that. But first of all, I want to talk about like where we're at right now. And I think in life, you got to keep it real. So I'm going to admit it's been pretty hard working on climate now. So how you doing?
Tired. I think you're probably a bit tired as well. But feeling that if there is a time that we have to team up and move forward is now. So I'm up for the game.
Up for the game. That's what I like. I like the Brazilian women, always up for the game, also for a good laugh. So let's talk about something you've been working on, which I think is super important. I thought about it a ton when I was minister, is making the link between climate and nature. Because I feel like it's very weird. There are climate people over here, and then there are nature people over here, and in some ways they don't link up very well. Even sometimes they're kind of in opposition. It's really quite weird. So you did this great TED Talk. So you talked about Brazil as a nature superpower, but you also linked this idea of nature and climate in the future. So maybe just talk about this, like nature and climate. What's the deal? Why are they separate worlds? And what can we do? And what is the opportunity for Brazil?
Well, thank you so much, Catherine. This is a big subject, so maybe just let's slice and move forward
Unpack
with different
it for us.
unpack. But I think to start, in our view, climate is part of nature. I mean, you have the planetary science today. We understand climate is a very important piece that is troubling all of us. But nature has wider implications as well. So the work we do at Igarapé focuses on three main subjects: security, nature, and climate, and their intersections. So I came to nature because we work on organized crime, and I was understanding the linkages with environmental crime. So our nature pillar focuses on how can we transform the illicit economies, what we call the environmental crimes, which are organizing ecosystems of environmental and non-environmental crime, into ecosystems of green enterprise. So we try to answer this through research, through a lot of work on command and control, from environmental oversight, prosecutors, fiscal units, police. But also, when we deal with nature and the possibility of having nature-based solutions, what we call in Brazil bioeconomies, in territories that are abundant of natural, let's say, biodiversity, these territories are being disputed by these illicit economies and by people that are, trying to live out of these ecosystems as well. So we understood that if we only looked at the issue as a security issue and not as a development issue, we would not be part of the solution. And we could actually push away people that were willing to invest in nature-based solutions, in natural climate solutions. So we also came up with the Green Bridge Facility, which is an impact unit inside the Igarapé Institute, to work on what we call these enabling conditions for nature-based solutions or natural climate solutions to land and endure in these territories. Because when you get there will be informality, illegality, land tenure issues, other complexities in terms of regulations, who is in charge of what, governance, very weak governance. So this work took us to climate. And how? Because in many places in the developing world, emissions are actually based on land use and agriculture. So changes in land use, so deforestation. And in the case of Brazil, for instance, over 90% of deforestation is illegal, is a result of environmental crime. So environmental crime is actually driving land use change, biodiversity loss, and of course accelerating climate change. Why? Because we're getting these amazing forests into the ground, we're cutting them, and they should be carbon sinks, and they're now carbon emitters in some parts. So they accelerate emissions instead of helping to capture the carbon, which is their, like let's say one of their big ecosystem services that are there. So we understood that we should, and we had to bring the discussions also on, let's say, nature conservation and how to value nature as a financial asset class to make sure we help to achieve, countries such as Brazil, but in the Amazon basin, the Congo basin, to achieve their NDCs. Brazilian NDCs.
And by the NDCs, because we try to
let's get there.
What's an NDC?
You should tell what is an NDC. Your turn.
Well, an NDC is basically your climate. It's your nationally determined contribution, which means nothing. It really means what's your climate goal. So, like, what are you committing to doing? Like, what are you going to reduce your emissions by? Maybe 50%, or 80%. So it's how are you going to meet that? I think is what you're talking about. How are you actually going to get the reductions that we're talking about?
Absolutely, and I think a very important point is that most of discussion on climate, of course, is like a transition away from fossil fuels, which is, of course, key. And we have to get there, including at COP30, we're going to talk about it. But many countries in the southern part of the globe actually have their emissions pattern based on deforestation and in the way they do like their agriculture. So Brazil is one of these countries. So around 50% of Brazil's emission is deforestation, of which 90% is illegal. So let's say if I don't tackle environmental crime and really put this into the agenda, Brazil is not going to be its NDC. So Brazil has a commitment to get to zero deforestation by 2030 and restore 12 million hectares. This is Brazil's NDC. Because when we look at our energy matrix, we already have like around 90% of our electricity coming from renewables, and overall, like more than 40% already internet. So we're ahead of many countries in the energy transition. Not to say that we don't have to do more; we need to do much more, and there's the other question here as well. But the biggest elephant in the room for us is illegal deforestation. So the work we do, then we try to show how important this is, not only for Brazil, because if you analyze the NDCs of the Amazon basin countries, of the Congo basin countries, of some of the Indonesia biomes, they do need, to do a lot of homework as we do here with the deforestation part, right? And we have then to have two roadmaps, I think, at COP, and that's why the nature inclusion is so important. One is the roadmap to transition away from fossil fuels. The other one is the roadmap how to get to zero deforestation. This entered the COP discussion strongly in Glasgow with commitments, including the action agenda from it's a mention in some parts, but it's also commitments from financial sector, private sector, but nobody included this in their goals. So it's an elephant that we have to put at the table and also say it's also a transition plan that we're going to have to tackle.
So that's amazing. But let's put this in real terms. So when I think of Brazil, I think about the Amazon, I think about the rainforest. And so you came to this in an interesting way because you're like, okay, we've got these problems, environmental crimes, but if you put in real terms, it's like people just illegally cutting down the rainforest. Is that an example of an environmental crime?
Yeah. So in the past, it was much more. So that let's say a step back. Cutting the forest was actually a public policy in Brazil in the 70s. When we were under dictatorship, the military dictatorship said the Amazon is a land for man without land. So basically saying, go there, deforest and conquer, not taking any, let's say, measure of respect to the indigenous peoples that were there. Or already, I mean, at that time, science was not great as today, but there was already some science on, the importance of nature, and climate change was starting to pop up. So this is mid 70s to mid 80s. We had a policy here to reward those who deforested the Amazon. So imagine how recent this is for the paradigm that we have today, right? So yes, it started as people, like good citizens, going there and trying to earn their living, planting, raising cattle, and let's say starting some bioeconomy, which we, like harvesting from forest products, timber, and so on. But today the situation is different. Of course, there are people that depend on the forest for their subsistence, but there is a very complex situation with organized crime that is linked to environmental crime. So to say, the demand for the forest products are global. So let's say the timber that is illicitly cut, the gold that is illicitly extracted, these are global markets. Or the cattle and the soy sometimes that grow in deforested and grabbed land. So this is the bulk today of like a really environmental crime at scale. Of course, there will be the small ones that are there for subsistence. And for them, I think we really need to give alternatives. But we're dealing with something much more organized, much more linked to global markets that could be solved, with traceability, with more control on illegal financial flows, and also on more investment in nature-based solutions, right? I mean, economies that are compatible with the biomes, with the standing forest, for instance.
So it's actually really fascinating because I like that also you're trying to put a value on something that has a value, but in a more positive way, as opposed to extracting. How do you actually use it, as you said, so that it pulls carbon out of the atmosphere, and provides income to communities? And then you prevent and you create a network to be able to prevent the folks, the organized crime that come in. I mean, it's a big challenge because it's obviously a lot of money is at stake, but it's really great that you're working on it because, as you say, good for nature, good for the planet, in terms of climate. So, okay, let's talk about COP. Brazil is hosting. So I think people are, really excited. Brazil, under President Lula is a leader. And as you say, Brazil has made a lot of progress on climate, always a lot more work for every country to do. But what's the goal of this COP? Because I think a lot of people are asking, like, how do we support Brazil? What does a good outcome look like? And so how are we going to get from where we are now to a big celebration after COP, hopefully at the end of COP, feeling like we've actually achieved a lot of progress?
Perfect. I think, we are women of high ambition. So let's say, what's the best scenario? And of course, what are people saying that will be achievable, right? So I think the best case scenario is that we have a COP that reinforces the importance of multilateralism, let's say, or climate governance. And here also the synergies between nature and climate will be at front because Brazil is bringing the forest inside the discussion. And we can talk about that in the financial instruments as well. But so climate and nature governance reinforced. Multilateralism is alive. So I think this is a first goal. And it's not a small one in the geopolitical context that we're going through, as you know well. So I think first of all, we need to guarantee COP happens. Countries can afford accommodation in Belém, which I know it's a huge problem, and Brazil has to deliver on that. But that also countries understand the importance of taking collective decisions that are good for today and for the future generations. So I think that's first one. The second one, I think there is the whole discussion on how to deliver on the Baku to Belém roadmap, financial roadmap. Again, huge challenge given where money is going today. Money is going to defense, money is going to the wrong places, unfortunately, given the lack of let's say, cooperation in the world, to say very, very little about it. But Brazil is ambitious in signaling ways of contributing, both public finance, but especially private finance, to the 1.3 trillion roadmap that you're working so hard. I know, Catherine, and you should just tell us a bit about that. So in that front, Brazil is going to focus on especially finance for a mechanism that it's creating called the Tropical Forest Finance Fund or Facility, the TFFF, which is basically an instrument that will allow long-term investors to invest. It's not a grant, but to invest in funds that will go to tropical forest countries that do not deforest. So it's a yearly mechanism based on the exchange rate difference between AAA titles and what that investment can earn. A little bit technical, but innovative. And I think it's important because, as we just saying in the beginning, it starts to see nature and forests beyond carbon for what they provide us as as their whole value, the ecosystem services. So it's basically payment per hectare of non-deforested land. So one thing is that. The other, finance for adaptation. And I think, again, you're big on that. And you know how important it is to fight for mitigation. But unfortunately, we are in a threshold of climate change already, that we have to talk about adaptation and about the vulnerable countries that are already suffering from the let's say, the consequences of climate change. And then I think there's a big play for small island states, and then for many other countries that are very worried about their most vulnerable population. So I think Brazil will be also supportive of advancing not only conversations, but pledges in that direction. And overall, I think the big deliverables, apart from multilateralism, governance and finance, is that we actually have plans for transitioning away. What is what's the roadmap then? We had the finance roadmap for 1.3, which I think we're not going to get to the end now, but I hope to, Brazil that we can advance on that roadmap. But we need a roadmap to fulfill the words that were put into,
which are phase out fossil fuels.
Yeah, I think it was transitioning away.
Climate crisis.
Yeah, so I think, how to materialize that. So I think giving some specificity to this, as also, we try to give into the roadmap for 1.3 trillion, is important. And let's say, if we're very successful, we could also have, at least at the table, the need to have a roadmap to achieve zero deforestation. As we said, different countries, different emissions patterns, and it's also a big contributor to climate change today. So that would be, let's say, the big ambition that we would have to deliver in all these fronts. And of course, it's in the Amazon, so we can't forget that there will be the biggest indigenous peoples delegation. And I think this is not, let's say, it's not a small thing. And I hope we actually give voice and understand what they're telling us to be, let's say, riding with the right ambition. I think there will be young people, there will be indigenous peoples, there will be different, let's say, stakeholders that could get leaders more accountable. And I hope there is space for them to do that.
So maybe let's break it down a bit, but like making it really accessible, because I think most people are like, what even happens to these climate negotiations? Like there's things about targets and net zero and adaptation mitigation. So imagine, because I assume you often meet with women in communities or indigenous women or, just girls that are trying to understand this. So if you're saying to them, why does this matter? Why does it matter that Brazil is hosting the climate conference? And what will it make you, what are you hoping that will happen that will actually help improve their lives? Maybe not exactly in the short term, but in the long term. Like, how would you explain it to them? Because I always think it's hard, because it just seems like there's like, we're negotiating this and there are these words and we're hoping for this. And then people are like, does any of this matter? So make the case for, why would it matter to a regular person that at COP, at the climate conference, that we're actually getting more action and commitments, money for nature, money to protect against the impacts of climate change that countries are already seeing?
So first, I think women are much more tuned to the changes that are already happening. So, if you are, let's say, an environmental defender in the front line here, as we have so many in this country, that are defending their territories against invaders, against all sorts of exploitation that is totally disrespectful to their, let's say, not only way of living, but also their, their right to that land. So I think they understand that they are in a battle. So if we host COP at the, in the middle of the Amazon, putting the forest in the discussion, they feel it's also talking about me, my role as defending this forest. If I go to the cities, the girls and the women that are there already suffering, like we have so many let's say, irregular settlements that when there is rain, when, the pattern of rain changes and it pours, there's a lot of landslide, there's a lot of flooding in places that people, all over Brazil and all over the region, all over the world, people are understanding there's something wrong. This used to happen, but maybe in a much more, kind of a, let's say, in a much wider time frame. Now it's happening more and more. If you are a farming woman or a family of farmers and the women are there, they're feeling the same. They're feeling, well, like we're losing more crops before the drought, before excessive rain, and the temperature. Wow, my croppers, like my crops don't stand the kind of heat waves that we have. So there is let's say, a feeling that is already happening, and women get it. So I think telling them,
women totally get it.
They get it because they're afraid because women don't take short-term decisions. Of course, they have to feed their kids, but they understand that they want to live a world for their kids to thrive. And I think that's the difference, because this short-termism that we're living, the men that are taking decisions today, only looking for, their immediate time, being power, being at a company, C-level position. It's let's say, it's something quite scary how they do not think about their kids. And I think women do. We do not want to fail our kids. And I think that's why it's so important to have women understanding that these negotiations, even if they have all these technical words that even us struggle to get sometimes, even if you're part of the debate for many years, there's always something new coming that you have to catch up. It's about those day-to-day kind of changes and impacts that they're already happening. And also it's about opportunities, because they're worried about what kind of jobs their kids will have. And the world is changing, and the green jobs are actually jobs that will come with innovation, that will come with, in many countries, unfortunately in some now, no, but in many countries with incentives. So what can we actually do also to do better with these opportunities? So I think there's a lot of opportunity in the green written large sectors that we need to advance to accomplish the goals that we spoke here on our NDCs and beyond. So I do, just to say, the women know that even if they're not at the negotiation room, they have other women that they could support, that will be there, and that they can tell the impact, at their lives at first hand, in person. So I think that's why the participation at this COP is so important. Tell your story. And it's a country in the South that is very open for the Southern needs, which many times are different from the Northern needs. Not to say climate change will impact everybody, but impacts differently, right? There are countries that are much more vulnerable, and parts of the populations even more. And I think the way Brazil should, and I think is preparing the leadership of this COP, is to make sure this, like, let's say, the majority of the world's problem, because this is the majority of the population, are even more urgent than what was dealt at the previous COPs. So let's put a sense of urgency there as well.
I think that is absolutely true. We really need, like, we need more women, we need more urgency, we need more action, and hopefully that's what we'll see. So look, this is pretty heavy stuff. So now we're gonna go to my favorite section, which is, so what do you do to get away from this? Like at some point we do need a break. Although Christiana
Yeah.
Figueres was like, no, you've got to just kind of absorb it. If there's pain, absorb it. So I agree with that. But if you just want to just do something fun, I
You
love
know,
swimming, open
oh
water
yeah,
swimming.
yeah.
What do you like doing?
So I love nature. So I mean, it's part of the conversation, but I hide in my hideaway in my hometown. It's called Nova Friburgo. And Catherine, it's interesting what happened in the last a little bit of more than a year, but because I've been so involved in the work of environmental crime in the Amazon basin, like I'm in a biome here. It's called the Atlantic Forest. Is the biome that when Brazil was colonized, many hundreds of years ago, got almost destroyed. But it's even more diverse. It's also a tropical forest, even more diverse than the Amazon forest. And I was very lucky to be born in a super amazing city surrounded by nature, in the mountains of the state of Rio de Janeiro. But I only understood that that was threatened as well when I started really working with the problems in the Amazon. So I got back home and I started to understand, wow, this is a irregular settlement. The city is coming into the park buffer. What about, this new condo that is coming here in this protected area? So there's something wrong. So I decided, because I love so much going there and going to the trails, going to the waterfalls, and that's where I get my, let's say, my peace back. I can empty myself and re-energize and listen to the birds. And now I have the camera traps. Watch, I feel like I can't believe these are all here, and we don't see these animals. So I'm very thrilled that that nature is there. But I also decided that I could not only work in the policy level. I had to do something there in my hometown and start, be part of the networks of the private reserves that we can do as part of the law here. You can actually give land easements and protect your land forever. So we're doing a big mobilization to do an ecological corridor and so on. But to say, I'm learning now how to plant, what kind of species, native species, agroforestry. And I think this is a new chapter in my life. I never did that because I'm always in the policy. And I said, I need to be grounded because that's so important in today's world that you get to something that helps you to be grounded. And I found it in my hometown without thinking that was a problem before. I took it for granted, right? But being part of also mobilizing the people to preserve these amazing assets that we have.
So that's awesome. So you're preserving something and then you get to be out and enjoy it and really
Amazingly, yes.
feel like it's
yes.
all connected, that actually there
It
are
is
results
connected.
from all of this work. And you can just, look at the birds, look at the trees, look at the
And
beautiful
enjoy
nature.
and receive what they give us, right? I mean, the nature bath that the Japanese speak so I think wisely about. But I'm also a big
Wow.
dancer and I love music. That's also true.
No, don't worry, we're coming to that. Hold on to that thought. Start thinking about, your music and what dancing. Okay, so one last question. This is Women Leading on Climate podcast. I've been really focused on this network of women as a theory of change. Women 2.5 times more likely to act on climate, to talk about climate in their communities. And so we need to be bringing women together to also feel strength, because sometimes it can feel quite lonely. And then also figure out, okay, where are the areas that we're going to work together? And so I know you're an amazing woman leader, but you also interact with so many amazing women, from Indigenous women to youth activists, to women leaders. So what can you tell us about women's leadership in Brazil when it comes to nature and climate, which, as you say, are kind of the same thing? What can you tell us that's inspired you?
So I would say that climate action here is women land. It's a really like it's a real kind of a Gaia, you know, the word for the earth. It's earth. It's Mother Earth that is kind of leading in Brazil. So from our environmental minister Marina Silva, who is let's say an icon here for so many decades in the world. I mean, even before we all understood what this was all about, she was working in her home state and town, like on like the direct defense of the forest. So she was close to Chico Mendes, who was, you know, this environmental leader that was assassinated in Brazil. She's something else. She's been through it all, you know, and she's a leader that is wise, that is very inspiring and very effective, because she actually delivers on deforestation reduction in Brazil as nobody had done before. And, you know, it's different governments, different terms, and she's there just delivering results and against all the lobbies, like very brave, very courageous. We have also, for the first time, the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples, also led by Sonia, like a super strong woman. And I think Sonia opens the floor to like hundreds, thousands of women that we have that are environmental defenders and just amplify their voices. And I'm super fond of so many of them. And the young generation, Catherine, as you know, Paloma, that you met before, but also Chai. We have Juma, we have Samila, we have Wanda, we have Alessandra, we have Claudelice, Angela Mendes. So it's like I can't even name how many women are there, you know, with their lives just daily, just not only defending their territories and their peoples, but showing us what's happening and being able to hold on together. And I think reinforcing their networks, reinforcing the protection that they need today to continue calling all of us, you know, they call what is needed, and I think we feel accountable. I feel very accountable to them, and I think their example should resonate because they need to be heard. And if I think about my own daughter, she's 11 years old, and of course she listens to what we talk at home, but we don't really involve her. And suddenly she starts campaigning in her little student council as a environmentalist at 10 years old.
I like it. I think I can see a picture of her behind you. There's a nice picture of her there. There she is.
Here, yeah. So she's
11 years old. She's like, I'm gonna be doing my own thing. I'm gonna find my own way to make change. That's awesome.
And interesting enough, Catherine, she decides to go into oceans because her mother and father are too much into forest. So I said, I'll learn about oceans with my daughter. But to say she's now in a children's board with an amazing organization here called Ilona that defends the rights of children, especially children in nature. So already there, expressing her, you know, her thoughts, her worries, but also her ideas, which I think when you see kids at this age, and of course we're worried about their mental health, about how they're going to cope with all these changes and anxiety. You know, I have nieces that you know that are all very worried about what's going on. But if we empower them and if we actually do our job to leave for them conditions that they can actually, you know, continue a work that is hopeful, I think we can rest in peace when time comes. Otherwise, you know, like I don't want to look at my daughter and say, I failed. You know, I say, of course, alone, nobody will deliver anything. But we have to build the right coalitions. And women are the first ones, you know, that I think are already doing that. And how many more we should just add up and invite to join. And I think that's the only thing we can do. I mean, how are you feeling? I'm tired, but is there anything else that we should be doing? No, we have to do this.
Ilona, you're awesome. So we will see you next week.
For sure. Yeah, wonderful. Take care. Thank you.
Right,
Bye-bye.
Bye. You've been listening to the Women Leading on Climate podcast. I'm your host, Catherine McKenna. Thanks to the McConnell Foundation for helping make this happen. And until next time, be brave, speak up, and keep on pushing forward on climate.